Work is the only thing you can trust. People betray, emotions get in the way, love blinds you, but the law remains unchanged. My name is Juan UK, and I'm a lawyer. Maybe I'm not the most pleasant person in our firm, but I don't need to be liked. I need to be respected. There's no room for weakness in the courtroom, and I've never allowed myself to be vulnerable. Today was the same as any other. I was sitting in my office on the floor of a glass skyscraper, which houses one of the most prestigious law firms in Seoul. Outside the window, the city's soulless lights, hundreds of cars speeding along, people on the sidewalks rushing about like ants. Everyone's hurrying somewhere, searching for something. I've long since known there's nothing to search for. On the desk in front of me lay the documents for another case. A wealthy heir to a car empire, Choi Min-won, got himself into a loud scandal, charges of embezzlement, corporate fraud, and even suspected bribery. A whole army of prosecutors was against him, but I didn't care. My job is to win the case, and I knew how to do it. I picked up one of the documents and skimmed over the lines. Dirt. Nothing but dirt. I knew my client was no saint, but it didn't matter. There's no profit in the truth, but there is in a good lawyer. SSI, the door to my office opened a crack, and John Miso, my assistant, appeared in the doorway. You have a meeting with Prosecutor Kim in 20 minutes. Let him wait, I said without even looking up. Miso sighed heavily. He's not the kind of person who will wait. Then let him learn, I said with a half smile. Kim Jae-ho. Experienced enough, smart enough, but still too naive. He was one of those who believed in justice. In people. In honor and morality. I'd destroy people like that in court within minutes. I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the office's glass wall. Long dark hair lay neatly my expensive, perfectly tailored suit and flawless makeup. Showing weakness was unacceptable. Have him come in 15 minutes, I said, signing another document. Miso nodded and left. I was alone again. The silence in the office was ringing. I was used to being alone. I had no friends, only business partners and competitors. I hardly remembered my parents. My father left the family when I was 8. My mother worked day and night to support us, then she got sick and died when I was 17. From then on, I've been climbing my way up alone. Love? I knew exactly what it cost. People love you as long as you're useful, as long as you suit them. The moment you show a hint of weakness, letting them into your heart, they crush you. I remembered how my ex-fiancée, Kang Jin, once told me, you live as if you don't need anyone. As if you really can be happy alone with your files. I just laughed at that. Of course I can. Well, that was right before I caught him with that woman in my own apartment. I didn't throw a fit. I simply gathered all his things and tossed them out on the landing. A few minutes later, there was a knock on the door. Come in, I said. The door opened, and Kim Jae-ho walked in. Tall, confident, with the look in his eyes that I hated, the look of someone who still believes in justice. Han SSI, he said, nodding as he sat down across from me. Let's talk. I smirked. If you're hoping to talk me out of this case, you're wasting your time. He gave a half smile. And if I just want to see if you have a heart? I didn't answer. I just gave him a cold stare. What nonsense. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms across my chest, and looked at Kim Jae-ho intently. He seemed confident, but there was a subtle hint of mockery in his eyes, like he knew something I didn't. If I have no heart, do you want to prove that you do? I asked, lifting an eyebrow. He smiled. I'm just trying to understand what drives you, SSI. Victory, I replied instantly. Victory at any cost? Victory, because if you're not winning, you're being destroyed. That's not a philosophy, Prosecutor Kim, it's a fact. Maybe you should learn to play by these rules if you want to last in this world. Jeho nodded as if agreeing, but I knew he didn't. He was the type who wouldn't sacrifice his principles even under pressure. That's precisely why my clients hated him so much. He couldn't be bribed, he wouldn't back down or look for loopholes. I see where you're coming from, he finally said. But I think you don't fully understand yourself. What's that supposed to mean? He leaned in a bit, looking straight into my eyes. You're afraid that if you ever stop for a moment, you'll realize that this life of yours, this job, has brought you absolutely nothing. My jaw tightened a bit, but I didn't let it show. That's a deep analysis, Prosecutor Kim, but I'm not interested. If you came here to psychoanalyze me, you wasted your time. Maybe, he said with a smirk. But you know what's interesting? When will you realize that everything you do hasn't made you happy? A shiver ran through me, but I didn't show any emotion. Enough psychology, I said, sitting up straight. Do you have any specific questions about the case? Yes, his tone became serious at once. Are you really going to defend Choi Min-hwan, knowing he's guilty? I gave a derisive smile. You know that doesn't matter. I'm a lawyer. I defend clients, not lecture them on morals. That's the problem, Jeho said, leaning back in his seat. You don't care if someone's guilty or not. You just want to win. You say that like it's a bad thing. I'm a lawyer. Because it is a bad thing. We stared at each other for a few seconds. I knew he despised me. But there was something else in his gaze. A strange curiosity, as if he was trying to figure me out. I felt uneasy. If you're finished, I said, standing up, please leave my office. Jeho stood as well, but before leaving, he said, you know, Han Soyand SSI. I always thought that even the coldest people eventually meet someone who warms their soul, but with your attitude, it seems like you won't be needed by anyone. I ignored his words. When the door closed behind him, I was left in silence. I stood up, grabbed my car keys, and headed out. It had been a long day. I left my office, walking through the empty lobby of our skyscraper. By that time, only security guards and cleaning staff remained in the building. Approaching the elevator, I pressed the button, waiting for the polished metal doors to slide open. The elevator slid down slowly, but it didn't bother me. I felt empty inside. A usual feeling. Once in the underground parking garage, I headed to my car, a black Audi, perfect in its cold elegance. I loved this car. Clean lines, power under the hood, smooth handling, like me, it was flawless, built to win. The doors closed, the engine started with a soft purr. I drove out onto the highway lit by sparse street lamps. It was past midnight. The roads were almost empty, just a few solitary cars gliding through the night, their red taillights breaking up the darkness. I should have driven home. A shower, a couple of hours sleep, and back to work. Tomorrow would be another day, full of deals, court sessions, legal maneuvers, and mostly sleazy clients. Everything was going according to plan. I slowed down. My intuition rarely failed me, and right now it was screaming. That was when a shadow darted out from an alley. It all happened in a split second. I saw a person's silhouette appear in the road right in front of me. Dark clothes, a hood, arms outstretched. He wasn't trying to run across the street. He just stood there, as if waiting. My reflexes acted faster than my consciousness. I jerked the steering wheel to the side. The tires squealed, metal scraped, and the world flipped over. I lost control of the car. Gravel under the wheels. A sharp impact. The crack of glass. The car skidded sideways until it hit a concrete barrier. For a moment, everything was still. Then the pain came. It came in a wave, filling every cell of my body. It was hard to breathe. I felt warm wetness on my face of blood. My ears rang. I tried to move my arm, but my fingers wouldn't respond. Somewhere in the distance, a siren blared. I wanted to cry for help, but my voice was stuck. Darkness began to consume me. The last thing I saw was the silhouette of someone standing on the side of the road. He wasn't trying to help. He was just watching. Then everything disappeared. Silence. I opened my eyes, and a bright white light blinded me. I blinked, trying to figure out where I was. Everything was perfectly clean, white walls, white floor, white ceiling merging into one. I stood there, my head spinning, trying to focus. At the far end of the space stood a figure draped in a long cloak with a hood that concealed his face. Where am I? I asked, my voice echoing in the emptiness. Let's call it a courtroom, he replied without turning around. Am I dead? Or is this some unfunny joke? I tried to be glib, but deep inside I was scared. No more jokes, his voice was calm yet unshakably certain. Were you satisfied with your life? Did you do everything you wanted to? I froze. The question caught me off guard. Of course not, I answered, trying to sound confident. I'm at the peak of my career, my youth. I still have so many plans. What kind of questions are these? What have you left behind? He continued, as if not hearing me. I paused to think. What had I left behind? Articles, investigations, scandals. But something more? Something truly important? I don't know, I whispered. Would you like another chance at life? He asked. Of course I do. I burst out. What kind of stupid question is that? I'm willing to give it to you, but on one condition. He finally turned around, though his face was still hidden by the hood. You have 0.00 days to find love and become the exact opposite of who you are now. To become happy. I'm already happy, I countered, though something in me twinged. No, you're not, his voice was firm. Do you agree? I hesitated, not sure what kind of game this was. But I had no choice. Yes, I agree, I said at last. Minus 100 days, he repeated. If you fail, then the accident you had will be fatal. A blinding light enveloped me again, and I closed my eyes. When I opened them, I was in my own apartment. Everything was as usual, dark-toned furniture, a restrained interior, no extra details. I stood there, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Was it a dream? A hallucination? I couldn't think of another explanation. I needed to pull myself together. A hot shower and a glass of wine, that's what I needed. I went to the bathroom, turned on the water, and let it wash away my tension. Then, wrapped in a towel, I sat in an armchair, opened my laptop, and pulled up the case I'd been working on. But I couldn't focus. In my head, I kept hearing that person's words, 0.100 days to find love. All right, I mumbled under my breath. Why not? I opened a dating site, filled out a profile, posted my best photo, and closed the laptop, deciding that was enough for the day. That night, I dreamed again of the figure in white, repeating 0.00 days. I woke up to a beeping sound. It was my laptop. I picked it up and opened it. On the dating site there were several notifications. Men, and even some women. I scrolled through messages until one caught my attention and made me smile. Are you ready to change your life? Wrote a guy in a white shirt. Cocky, I smirked. But something about his message piqued my interest. I replied, and we arranged to meet. I closed the laptop and went to shower. Work didn't wait, and I had an important meeting with a client. After a quick rinse, I put on my black dress, styled my hair, and decided not to have breakfast at home. Instead, I planned to stop by a bakery on the way to the office. I grabbed my bag, slipped on my heels, left the apartment, and headed for the elevator. Once I reached the parking area, I froze in confusion. My car was nowhere to be found. I rummaged through my bag for the keys, but they weren't there either. What the hell? I muttered. Deciding I'd have to deal with it later, I called a taxi, which arrived quickly. I got in and stared out the window. My thoughts were a jumbled mess. What did I even want from life? Was I really living the way I wanted? Stop at the bakery, please, I asked the driver. Paying for the taxi, I got out and crossed the street. As soon as I walked into the small, cozy bakery, I was greeted by the aroma of fresh pastries. I chose a cappuccino and a cinnamon roll, but barely managed to turn around when a guy bumped into me, spilling coffee on my dress. "Oh, I'm so sorry." He began to apologize, but I just raised my hand for him to stop talking. I grabbed a napkin to blot the coffee off the fabric, giving him only a brief glance. He looked nice, apparently worked there, judging by the bakery uniform. I hope you get in trouble for spilling coffee on customers, I thought to myself before leaving. At the office, I greeted my colleagues and went straight up to my office. First thing, I told my assistant to find my car. "Excuse me, but you don't have a car," she said, looking at me in surprise. "What do you mean, I don't?" I said. "A black Audi," I added the plate number. She nodded and left, and I shut my office door. Morning's barely started, and it's already crazy, I sighed, sitting down at my desk. I picked up some documents and started preparing for a client meeting, but my thoughts kept circling back to the missing car. How could it just disappear? There was a knock at the door. "Come in," I said without looking up from the papers. I looked up that license plate, my assistant began. "It belongs to someone named Juan UK, from Busan." I said nothing, just nodded for her to leave. How was that possible? I had bought that car on credit, and I knew for certain it was mine. It had cost a fortune. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop, determined to track down this Juan UK. But there were too many people with the same name. "Find me this Juan UK's address or workplace," I told my assistant over the phone. A few minutes later, she came back in with an address. "Here," she said, handing me a slip of paper. I grabbed my bag and stood up. "You have a meeting with a client," she reminded me. "Reschedule everything," I called over my shoulder. I left the building, deciding to take the subway. Might as well clear my head. I hadn't gone anywhere by public transport in a while. The air was cool, and I felt myself calming down a bit as I walked. At the station, I bought a ticket and sat on a bench, watching people go by. Nearby stood a family with two little girls clinging to their parents, all of them looking so happy. A sweet picture. What makes them so happy? The thought flashed in my head. Maybe I really would be happy if I found love. That seems to work for other people. Otherwise, in my old age, I won't even have someone to bring me a glass of water. Oh wait, there won't be any old age for me if I fail this mission. While I was thinking about that, the train arrived. I got on and sat away from everyone else. I really wasn't in the mood to chat. Time passed quickly. Soon I arrived in Busan. I called a taxi straight to the address, but on the ride I kept thinking, what am I even going to say to this guy? "Hello, give me back my car." It was always mine, but then I had a weird dream, and now it's yours? I muttered under my breath. This was all so stupid. Whatever, I'll figure it out. The taxi pulled up in front of the building, and I sat there for a while, unable to get out. An overwhelming, inexplicable fear gripped me, which was strange, because fear isn't in my nature. "Come on, pull yourself together," I whispered to myself, stepping out of the cab. I went into the building and took the elevator to the correct floor. Walking down the corridor, I was hoping he wouldn't be home. But when I pressed the doorbell, there was silence. Well, fine, I thought, turning to leave. But at that moment, the door opened. I turned around and saw a young man, tall, neatly trimmed hair, and sharp eyes. I started, wanting to claim I'd made a mistake, but cowardice isn't my style. I stepped up to the door. "Hello," I said, trying to sound confident. My name's Cha Soyan. I'm looking for Juan UK. That's me, he replied, tilting his head slightly. How can I help you? I froze, realizing I now had to explain why I was there. I just stared at him, trying to form a coherent thought. He smiled and asked, Are we playing the silent game? Or is it all nonverbal communication now? I hesitated but decided to come straight out with it. This might sound crazy, or even insane, but you have my car. I bought it on credit 2 years ago. There's a scratch on the left bumper. The man chuckled slightly. I gave him a confused look. You think this is funny? I asked, feeling my irritation rise. No, it's just unexpected, he answered, still smiling. Come in, let's talk inside. No point standing in the doorway. I stepped into a cozy, bright apartment. He gestured to the sofa and asked, Want something to drink? Coffee, please, I answered, sitting down. While he was making coffee, he asked me where I was from. I told him I came from Seoul. You came a long way just for a car, he remarked. It's important to me, I said. I earned it on my own. It was my first big purchase. He brought the coffee and sat down next to me. All right, tell me more, he said, looking at me curiously. I sighed. It's all very strange, and even I think I'm going nuts. Supposedly, I got into a car accident 2 days ago, but then I ended up at home. And next morning, the car was gone. That makes sense, he said. Maybe the police or a tow yard took it. No, I countered. My assistant said I never had a car at all. But I know I did. I'm not crazy. He raised an eyebrow at me. Well, I'm not so sure, he teased. The thing is, I've owned that car for 6 months now. He got up, went somewhere, and came back with a document in hand. Look, here's the sale agreement. I bought it from an old man. I glanced quickly at the paper. Everything matched, the license number, the VIN. I handed the document back to him, totally at a loss. Maybe I'm just overworked, I said, so he wouldn't think I belonged in a psychiatric ward. He watched me silently for a moment, then suggested, Well, since you're already a guest in this city, I could show you around. I didn't reply right away, lost in my thoughts, but eventually realized it might be a good idea. I didn't really want to go home, and a change of scenery might clear my head. Sure, I'll go, I said at last. Great, he said, heading off to get ready. I watched him as he came back. A white shirt, dress pants, a watch, everything fit him perfectly. Ready? He asked, returning. I simply nodded. We left the apartment and headed to the elevator. What kind of leisure activities do you enjoy? He asked on the way down. I don't even know, I admitted honestly. I can't remember the last time I had a break. He frowned. I know exactly what you need. We went down to the parking area and approached my car, well, his car. He gave me a look and tossed me the keys. You drive. I'll tell you where to go. I took the keys silently and got behind the wheel. My baby. How I'd missed the feeling of the leather steering wheel. He placed his phone with the navigation app in the holder and indicated a spot on the map. Head here. We drove through the city. It was strange to be behind the wheel in a city I didn't know, with a man I'd met only hours before. What do you do for work? I asked, trying to break the silence. I own a small company, he replied. And you? I'm a lawyer, I said proudly. I achieved everything by myself. Work is my whole life. How about a personal life? He asked. I smirked. I once tried to start a personal life, but my fiancée decided to share it with another woman. He said nothing, then finally remarked, I see. And now your heart is closed, and you're all about your job. Something like that, I answered. He pointed out where to stop. We pulled up to a large building with dark windows. He helped me out of the car and then wrapped a scarf around my eyes. "What's this for?" I asked. "Surprise," he said. I took his arm. His scarf smelled like an incredible cologne. I walked, blindfolded, holding onto the arm of a man I'd only known for hours, thinking about his scent. I'm such an idiot, I thought. I felt us enter a building. He told me to stand still and said he'd be right back. I did as he asked. A minute later he came back. "Let's go," he said. We walked for about 5 minutes, then entered some place that smelled unbelievably fresh, almost like a forest. "Ready?" he whispered near my ear. I nodded, and he took off the scarf. My eyes squinted, adjusting to the soft light streaming through a glass ceiling. At first, I saw only blurry silhouettes and gentle brightness. But once my eyes adapted, I realized we were in a restaurant unlike any I'd seen before. Around us was a veritable greenhouse, lush greenery, blooming plants, neatly tended flower beds. I froze, taking in the surroundings, while Juan UK gently placed a hand on my back, subtly guiding me forward. A slight chill ran down my spine at his touch, but I showed no sign. We approached the table, and as soon as we sat down, we received menus. "Hungry?" he asked, folding his hands on the table. I nodded. "I haven't eaten since morning." He said something briefly to the waiter, who smiled and left. "So, how do you like it?" Juan UK asked, watching me intently. I looked around again, inhaling the air filled with floral and spicy notes. "It's incredible. In the middle of a concrete jungle, an oasis of exotic plants, plus delicious food." He grinned. "They make the best jiggy here and serve tea on rose petals." My stomach rumbled painfully at the thought, and I swallowed, imagining the taste. I felt his eyes on me again. This time it wasn't just polite attention, more like a curious gaze of someone trying to figure something out. "Why are you staring at me like that?" I asked, looking directly into his dark eyes. He raised an eyebrow slightly. "Like what?" "Like you're searching for something inside me," he smiled. "I'm just trying to figure out where you came from and what I did to deserve this coincidence." I snorted, but the smile remained on my lips. "Hopefully in a good way?" He was about to answer when the waiter returned with trays of food. The aroma was divine, and the sight of it made me forget everything else for a moment. "This is amazing," I said enthusiastically after my first bite. "Glad you like it," he said softly and began to eat. As we dined, we talked more. I learned he hadn't been in a serious relationship for a while, just one fling back in college. "I don't believe a guy with such good taste in food has nobody," I teased. He laughed. "I guess I'm too busy with work." "What kind of work?" "I run a software development company." I narrowed my eyes. "So you're a nerd?" "Something like that," he said, not denying it. After dinner, he suggested taking a few pictures among the exotic plants. I didn't refuse, and after a brief photo session, we headed outside. "Thank you for today," I said sincerely as we strolled through the city at night. "And sorry I burst into your life so suddenly." He glanced at me and shook his head slightly. "I'm really glad you did." At those words, I suddenly felt warm. To hide my embarrassment, I lowered my head and quietly said, "Could you take me to the subway station?" But he stopped, looking at me with a hint of regret. "It's already late. The train back to Seoul won't run anymore." I paused, realizing what that meant. Then, "I need to find a hotel." "You can stay at my place," he offered simply. I hesitated, but I had no other options. Taking a deep breath, I called my assistant and told her I'd be delayed until morning. We stopped by a store for some groceries before heading to his apartment. Juan UK disappeared into the bedroom briefly and returned with pajamas. "You can tighten the drawstrings on these pants, though the t-shirt might be too big," he said. That's fine, thank you, I said, accepting them. He showed me to the bathroom. A hot shower helped me relax a bit. When I emerged, he was at the stove making tea. For a moment, his eyes lingered on me, but he quickly returned to his task. Have a seat, he said. I sat at the table, cupping my hands around the warm cup. Thank you for today. And for not sending me to the loony bin, I joked. He smiled. I haven't decided yet. We both laughed, continuing our quiet conversation. When it was time to sleep, he offered me his bed while he took the couch. I'm fine here, I assured him, not wanting to take his bed from him. All right then, he said softly. Good night. I tossed and turned, replaying the day's events. It felt strange, yet surprisingly comfortable. Eventually, I fell asleep. I woke to warm rays of sunlight peeking through the curtains. After lingering in bed for a few minutes, savoring the morning hush, I realized I had an important meeting today and couldn't laze around. Quietly standing up, I headed to the bathroom. The hot shower truly woke me up, and in a few minutes I was standing in front of the mirror, doing my hair. I could hear his steady breathing. He was still asleep. I didn't want to wake him. I grabbed a pen and wrote a quick note, "Thank you for everything. Because of you, I'm starting to see many things differently." Leaving the note on the table, I quickly dressed, took my bag, and slipped out the door. Outside, life was already in full swing, people rushing about, cars honking, someone gulping coffee on the go. Yet I felt a strange emptiness inside me, as if I didn't really want to be part of the bustle. More than that, I didn't want to leave. The memory of last evening had left me feeling warm, almost at home, as though I had known Juan UK my entire life. Sitting in the taxi, I realized I hadn't left him my phone number. Idiot. I scolded myself silently. When I reached the subway, I got my ticket, and the train arrived almost immediately. Making myself comfortable, I closed my eyes and dozed off. Approaching the city, I reached into my bag to call my assistant and ask her to order me breakfast. But when I rummaged around, my phone was nowhere to be found. Damn. I muttered, checking my pockets. No phone. Panic set in. It contained all my work contacts, crucial files, basically my entire life. Then I remembered putting it under the cushion last night. On the couch. In Juan UK's apartment. My heart skipped a beat. Once at the office, my assistant quickly filled me in on the day's tasks. I sighed, grabbed some coffee and matcha, and sat down to work. A couple of hours later, my client came in, arrogant and self-absorbed as always. "What's our plan?" he asked without greeting me. I walked him through the details of the case, but he seemed half-interested. "I'll pay you enough to win," he said, eyeing me with blatant interest. I resisted, rolling my eyes. "I'll try my best anyway, for my own reputation's sake. Losing a case wouldn't do me any favors." He snorted, then let his gaze slide down my neckline. I noticed that the top button of my shirt was undone, but I pretended not to see. Pretending not to notice, I said coolly, "If you have no further questions, I need to submit your documents for signature." He made a dissatisfied noise and left. Where's my professionalism, I thought. Suddenly, I remembered the look in Juan UK's eyes. That soft, dark gaze, full of some emotion I couldn't quite name. Stop it. Work. Think about the case. But my thoughts kept drifting back to him. By the end of the workday, for the first time in my life, I didn't want to stay in the office. I called a taxi, stopped by a store, then went home. The moment I walked into my apartment, I realized the dark interior no longer appealed to me. I want something bright, airy. Dropping my bags, I opened my laptop, checked my email, and remembered that I had agreed to meet the guy from the dating site. Somehow, the idea now seemed unbearably dull. I closed the laptop and went to the bathroom. A hot shower washed away the day's tension. Wrapped in a towel, I walked out into the living room. Suddenly the doorbell rang. I glanced at the clock. Who could it be so late? Approaching the door, I opened it cautiously. Standing there was Juan UK, my phone in his hands. I froze, realizing I was in nothing but a towel. You. I began, but he cut me off, holding up the phone. You forgot something. I slammed the door in his face. Automatically. Just out of sheer shock. A second later, I realized what I'd done and opened it again, abruptly. Come in, I mumbled, avoiding eye contact. Then I darted to the bedroom. Quickly pulling on a robe, I took the towel off my hair, ran my hands over my face to steady myself, and finally went back out. He was sitting on the couch, looking around my apartment with an amused smile. Cozy, like a cave, he smirked. I gave a dismissive snort. I used to like this style, I said with a shrug. Do you want something to drink? Coffee, he answered, making himself comfortable. I headed to the kitchen. A moment later, he came closer and put my phone on the table. Seems like this belongs to you. I turned around, took the phone, and said softly, thank you. He gave me a mischievous smile. To be honest, I'm glad you left it. Otherwise, you never would have given me your number. I forgot in my hurry, I said lamely, handing him a cup of coffee. We sat next to each other, and I inadvertently breathed in his scent. God, why did he feel so warm, so familiar? Well, now it's my turn to offer you a place to stay, I joked, trying to mask a slight nervousness. He laughed. Actually, I wasn't planning on staying. But since you insist, I nudged him with my shoulder, and he gave me a slight grin. All right, then. I felt my eyes wandering to his lips. Realizing this, I abruptly got up. I'll make up a bed for you, I said. But I don't really have pajamas in your size. I handed him a towel. That'll do, he smirked. Shall we pick a movie? I nodded, and soon we were both sitting together, eyes on the screen, laughing and commenting on the characters. After the comedy ended, I stood up. Good night, I said. Hope you won't disappear tomorrow like I did. He paused, and I closed the door behind me. Slipping into a light nightgown, I got into bed, but sleep wouldn't come. My mind was filled with thoughts of the man behind the wall. His lips, his hands. My God, what's wrong with me? Steeling myself, I got up and quietly opened the door. But he was already standing there. One step toward me, he cupped my face in his hands, and then kissed me. I felt his arms slide around my back, gently drawing me in. I took his hand and led him to the bedroom. Seating him on the bed, I climbed onto his lap and kissed him again. We didn't speak. Our bodies did the talking. I gave myself to him, body and soul. When I awoke, I felt an emptiness beside me. He was gone. Rising from the bed, I went to the kitchen. Empty. Frowning, I crossed my arms. Well, of course, I thought. What did I expect? We're both the same. He disappears, I disappear first. I sank onto the barstool with a heavy sigh. Right then, the door opened. There stood Juan UK, holding coffee and a paper bag. Thought I left? He asked. I gave a faint smile, taking one of the cups. It's pouring rain outside, he said, taking off his jacket. Well, come on in, let's warm up, I replied. He came closer, placed a hand on my waist, and kissed me, firmly, as if he had every right to. I blushed slightly but kissed him back. After breakfast, we both started getting ready. So, what's the plan? He asked as I buttoned my blouse. Work, unfortunately, I sighed. He gave me a look of mock disappointment. All right, then I'll go with you. Let's see where you work. You'll be bored. He grinned. You'll owe me for that. I smiled. Deal. Along the way, he told me about the times he used to come here often for business. Why didn't you stay? My parents. They're older now. I wanted to be near them when I launched my company. We kept chatting until we arrived at my office. He followed me in. You're such a neat freak, he said, looking over my perfectly organized files. And you're a nerd, I teased back. We both laughed. Right then, my assistant walked in. Any meetings today? No. Court tomorrow. Great. Thank you. She left. I sat down at my laptop, focusing on the documents. I could feel his gaze on me. Suddenly, I felt his hand resting on my back. My spine arched slightly. You're distracting me, I mumbled. He didn't reply. Instead, he locked the door and pulled down the blinds. My cheeks burned as I realized what he was implying. He came over, lifted me out of the chair, and leaned me against the desk. His lips found mine, his hands exploring my body. Not the best place. We're in an office, I whispered. He didn't stop. All you need to know is that it was passionate, unexpected. And I liked it. Afterward, I straightened my clothes while he smirked. You look perfect now, he said. Oh, thanks, I giggled, sitting back down. But concentrating on work was impossible. Let me finish at home, I said. Let's get out of here. Finally. Just then, his phone rang. He answered it and walked out of the office. I waited. 10 minutes. I went to look for him. He was gone. Where's the guy who came in with me? I asked my assistant. She called the reception desk. He left. I returned to my office, trying to compose myself. My head swirled with questions. Maybe something happened to him. But why wouldn't he at least tell me he had to rush off? Or send me a text? He definitely had my number. Something was obviously wrong. I decided not to call him first. If something urgent came up, he'd contact me once he handled it. I took a deep breath and tried to refocus on work. Documents, court, important cases. But images from the past few hours kept flashing in my mind. His hands, his gaze, his kisses. As if none of that had happened. Damn. I whispered, getting up abruptly from the desk. I knew I wouldn't get anything done in this state. I'm going home, I told my assistant, grabbing my bag. She nodded, giving me a puzzled look as I left. I walked down the street, breathing in the cool air, going nowhere in particular. On foot. Without a taxi, without hurrying. I just needed to move, to think of what to do next. By evening, I was back home. Placing my bag by the door, I went straight to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, drinking it in one go. The house felt strangely quiet, as if something, or someone, was missing. I opened my phone. No messages. Well, fine, I muttered, switching on the TV. A series, a movie, the news. Useless. All I could think about was how Juan UK had simply vanished. Right then, I remembered that weird .00 days deal. So much had happened that I'd nearly forgotten. I had court tomorrow for my client, so I had to get some early rest. That's what I did. I woke up in the morning and checked my phone first thing. Still no calls or texts. I sighed, got ready, slipped into my best suit, grabbed my files, and went to court. As usual, my dreadful client was there with his entourage. It was going to be a tough day. The trial felt endless, but physically I was there. Mentally, not so much. I won the case. My sleazy client got acquitted. After the hearing, he came up to me, shoved a thick envelope into my hand, and, without shame, let his fingers slip along the buttons of my blouse. I wouldn't mind seeing you in a more intimate setting, he said, sneering. I brushed his hand away, replying coldly, I don't get involved with clients. We're done now, so I'm not your client anymore, he retorted, and I'm not looking for a relationship. He placed his hand on his zipper, licked his lips, and left. What a jerk, I thought, feeling a wave of nausea. Almost 3 months passed. That's how long I went without seeing or hearing from Juan UK. You might ask why I never went looking for him. I knew his address, right? Yes, I did. But I wasn't about to force myself on someone. If he hadn't contacted me despite being able to, clearly he didn't want to. So I didn't need to either. A few days ago, I started having chest pain and went to the hospital. It turned out I had 2 broken ribs, which made no sense. They treated me and sent me home, but then I had a terrible headache. An MRI showed a slight hemorrhage. Basically, every day something new was going wrong, and with all that happening, I'd practically forgotten that Juan UK had ever been in my life. Eventually, I was admitted to the hospital for observation. One night, I woke up gasping for air. All I remember is hitting the nurse call button. Darkness closed in around me, swallowing me up. When I regained consciousness, everything was white. I didn't recognize my surroundings at first. My eyelids felt heavy, as if I'd been asleep for ages. My head throbbed, and my body felt limp. Blinking, I looked around. A hospital room. Machines beeping steadily. N4. I was alive. Then someone came in, and I turned my head slowly. Oh, you're awake. A woman in a white coat greeted me with a smile. How are you feeling? I wanted to answer, but my voice wouldn't come out. I swallowed and managed a hoarse reply, I guess I'm alive. She nodded, checking my vitals. You fainted because of acute oxygen deprivation. Good thing you called for us in time. Another few days under observation, and you should be fine. Another few days? I asked in surprise. I glanced toward the window. It was already dark. The ward was quiet except for the steady beep of the machine, reminding me that I was still here. Suddenly, I noticed something. A familiar scent lingered in the air. The nurse finished checking the equipment and headed to the door. Oh, by the way, someone came by earlier. We weren't letting visitors in at the time, so we told him he could see you once you woke. Who? My voice trembled. A tall man, she replied. My heart fluttered. He didn't say his name? She shrugged. Said he'd come back later. Before I could ask anything else, she left. I closed my eyes. Could it be him? After these excruciating months of silence, after I'd nearly convinced myself he was gone for good, maybe he was back. I wasn't sure if I wanted that or not. Hours went by. I was feeling a bit stronger but still weak. I sat on the bed, replaying the nurse's words in my mind. Tall man. Damn. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Then, the door opened with a quiet creak. I looked up. There he was, Juan UK. Holding a bouquet of roses, just as I remembered him. Dark hair slightly tousled, eyes deep and intense. He looked tired. And unsure. I didn't know what to say. Hi, he finally said. Hi? I replied. He walked closer, sat in the chair by my bed, and for a while just gazed at me. Are you okay? Aside from almost dying, I guess I'm fine, I said with a smirk. But he didn't smile. His expression was serious, almost grim. Why are you here, Juan UK? He didn't answer immediately. I heard you were in the hospital and... He ran a hand through his hair, as if collecting his thoughts. I couldn't stay away. I snorted. All this time you couldn't text or call? He lowered his eyes. I stared at him, waiting. I wanted to, he finally said. I clenched the bedsheet in my fists. Then why didn't you? I was worried sick. Silence. His hand tightened into a fist. Because I thought it would be better that way. I felt anger rising. Better for whom? He looked at me. For you. I took a deep breath, letting my frustration out. If only you knew what I've been through. He suddenly leaned in, his voice rough. I do know. I opened my eyes wide. He stared right into my soul. I knew everything. The whole time. My heart pounded. What? He took my hand. I kept an eye on you. I knew about your trials, that you kept winning cases. I knew you were having health issues. How? I couldn't just abandon you. His voice shook a little, but I couldn't show myself either. I was baffled. Before I could ask another question, he bent down and kissed me. I'm sorry. I looked at him, this man who had disappeared, but who, it turns out, had been there all along. You need to explain, I said quietly but firmly. He sat there at her hospital bedside, holding her hand tightly. She was finally awake, and he couldn't let her slip away again. He exhaled, as though bracing himself, and began to speak. After I left your office, I got a phone call. They said that if I didn't get out of your life, you'd get hurt. She paled. Who? Your client, Juan UK said bitterly, as though the word itself was poison. Or rather, his people. She felt her heart clench. But why me? You aren't just his lawyer, he explained. You're the only person capable of keeping him out of the mess he created. Plus, it seems he wanted you for himself. And I was presumably in his way, or your way. Distracting you. I looked away, remembering how disgusting that man had been after the trial. But why didn't you tell me? Because I knew you'd go after them, he said, shaking his head. And I couldn't let that happen. What did you do? He rubbed his face with his hand. I had to remember my old life, he said. I frowned. Old life? He was silent for a moment, then let out a bitter laugh. I wasn't always a company owner. I used to work for people who solved problems. By other methods. A chill went up my spine. You. I'm not in that line of work anymore, he assured, leaning closer. But for you, I made an exception. She swallowed. What did you do? He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. I found him and his friends. They thought they could intimidate me, but they didn't know one thing. They didn't know who I really am. She held her breath. You killed them? He shook his head. No. But they're gone. I made sure they'll never show up in your life again. In our life. She was speechless. He gazed at her for a long moment. I don't care what you think of me, but I won't let anyone hurt you. She felt goosebumps all over. He was dangerous, yet with him, she felt safe. She drew a deep breath. Thank you. He smirked. No need. She reached out, letting her fingers graze his cheek. You should have told me. I'm here now, he said, placing his hand over hers. And I'm never leaving. She smiled. Then come here. He leaned in, and she pressed her forehead against his, feeling his warmth and his breath. They didn't speak, words weren't necessary. Suddenly, she remembered, today is the 100th day. He frowned. What 100th day? She froze. She was alive. But how? Never mind, she shook her head, tightening her grip on his hand. She pulled him close, resting her forehead against his. They stayed like that, breathing together. Words were no longer needed. After I fully recovered, I quit that law firm. I no longer wanted to work for people like my former client. I moved in with Juan UK and opened my own practice. Now, I operated by my own rules, defending those who genuinely needed it. As for me and Juan UK, Everything was better than ever. It felt like he'd always been by my side. We'd laugh in the morning, discuss work over dinner, go to the movies, argue over which films to watch, then fall asleep in each other's arms, listening to the sound of our breathing. Soon I planned to meet his parents. I was a bit nervous, but he just teased me. "You think they can tear us apart?" "No," I smiled. "I just want everything to be perfect." He hugged me, gently stroking my back. "It will be perfect, because we're together." And he was right. Looking at him now, I realized, if not for everything that had happened, if not for this string of trials, I might never have understood the life I truly wanted. I was happy. Happy that, by someone's will, I got to meet this man. He changed me. And he changed my vision of the life I really want.